This happened in the winter of 2019, when I was living in a century-old farmhouse that had been converted into a duplex just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. It was one of those places that looked charming on the outside, peeling white paint. A big wraparound porch, but inside, it creaked with age. The plumbing was moody, the heating unpredictable, and every gust of wind made the whole structure groan like it was alive. I was renting the upstairs unit, a single bedroom, old hardwood floors, and a tiny kitchen with chipped tile counters. I'd moved in after a divorce thinking the quiet would be good for me. The downstairs unit was empty at the time, and that was part of the appeal. No noise. No neighbors. Just me, the wind, and the woods that bordered the back of the property. I'd been there about a month. When I first heard the noise, it was around 3 a.m. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still on, half a glass of wine on the coffee table. I woke up to silence, except for this dull, rhythmic thumping coming from beneath the floor, like a slow, heavy knock, not on the front door, not the walls. It's underneath me. At first I thought maybe the pipes were acting up, or maybe some old house settling, but then it stopped. Started again. 2 knocks, then silence, then 3, then silence again. The weirdest part was the timing. It was too measured. Not random like old wood shifting. Not frantic like an animal. It was almost like someone was knocking from under the floorboards. Just enough pressure to echo faintly upward. I remember standing in the middle of the room, barefoot on the cold wood, trying to figure out where exactly it was coming from. I pressed my ear to the floor. Nothing. Then knock. Knock almost. Right beneath me, I jumped back. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. I was tired. The wine. The old house. I even Googled it. Can houses make knocking sounds at night? Oh. One article blamed it on thermal expansion. That made me feel better for a night or two. But it kept happening. Always between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m. Always when I was just drifting off. The same slow knocking under the floor. Sometimes it felt like it was following me. Like I'd walk into the kitchen, and a few minutes later knock under the kitchen floor. I finally called the landlord. He was an older guy, retired, lived out of state. I asked if he'd had any issues with the house before, chuckled and said, "Old places make old noises. Don't let your imagination get the best of you." Then he said something that stuck with me, unless someone broke in and made themselves a little home under the house. Then he laughed. I didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the vent near the base of the wall, the one that connected to the crawl space under the house. I'd never looked down there, didn't even know how to access it. Around 3:15 a.m., it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. This. Time directly beneath my bed, and then faintly a dragging sound, like someone scooting slowly along the dirt. I called the police. I told them. I thought someone might be living under the house. They arrived in about 20 minutes. 2 officers. Both clearly thinking I was just another lonely person spooked by an old house. One of them went out back to check the crawlspace access. He returned 5 minutes later, his flashlight shaking slightly. He said, "Well, there's definitely signs someone's been down there. They found an old sleeping bag, empty fast food, wrappers, a stained pillow, and worst of all, a small notebook filled with bizarre sketches, stick figures with no eyes, long scribbled tunnels, pages of repeated words like underneath and closer." The officers checked the perimeter but found no one. They told me they'd make a report, that I should keep my doors locked, and that they'd patrol the area more often. But since there was no break-in and technically no crime, there wasn't much else they could do. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Near the floor vent in the living room, where I had been hearing the noises most often, there were tiny scratches on the hardwood, like someone had been poking through the slats from underneath. Testing them, I moved out 2 days later. Broke the lease. Never looked back. Sometimes when it's late and I can't sleep, I think about that house, about the thumping, about the notebook, and I wonder, was it just one person under there, or had someone dug even deeper? Story 2. This happened back in late 2019, just a few months before the world shut down at the time. I was working as a part-time janitor at a small community church in rural Kentucky. It was one of those old red brick buildings with a tall white steeple and a cemetery tucked behind it, surrounded by acres of quiet fields and woods. Peaceful during the day, terrifying at night. I worked mostly evening shifts, coming in after the congregation had cleared out. It's just me, a ring of keys and an old cassette radio I kept on low volume to keep from losing my mind. The job was simple. Mop the floors, clean the bathrooms, restock the kitchen, lock up. But on Thursdays, the church hosted an AA group. They usually wrapped up around 8 p.m., which meant I started my shift a little later. After everyone had gone, or at least I thought everyone had gone, one Thursday night in November, I pulled into the empty parking lot a little before 8:30. The sun had fully set, and the only light came from the single security lamp above the back entrance. The lot was empty except for one car, an old beat-up sedan parked way off in the far corner under a tree. No lights on, no one inside that I could see. I figured it belonged to one of the group members who was lagging behind. Sometimes people stuck around after meetings to talk. I didn't think much of it. I went inside, got to work, around 9:15. I was in the main hall when I heard a knock, not at the door, at the window. It was a light tap, almost too soft to notice at first. I paused the radio and listened. There it was again. Tap, dot, 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 tap, dot, dot, tap. Slow and deliberate. I walked over to the tall front window, parting the curtains slightly. There was a man standing just outside. Tall, thin, maybe mid-40s, long gray coat, balding, with sunken eyes and a jaw that looked too long for his face. He was staring up at the stained glass window like he couldn't see inside, but somehow knew I was watching. He didn't move, didn't smile, just stood there. I stepped back instinctively and grabbed my phone. But there was no signal inside the church. There never was. I ducked into the hallway, moved to the back entrance, and quietly opened the door to peer out. The lot was empty. Car from earlier? Gone. I checked the windows again. No sign of him. I told myself maybe he was just someone from the meeting who got turned around. But the way he stared, that stillness, it reminded me of something you'd see in a wildlife documentary. A predator waiting. I locked all the doors. 30 minutes later. I was finishing up the bathroom when I heard something that made my blood run cold. The back door creaked open. I froze. I know I had locked it. I killed the light, stepped into the utility closet, and pulled the door shut behind me, leaving just a sliver open so I could see out. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. Footsteps echoed on the tiled, floored slow, measured, heavy-soled boots. I couldn't see him, the angle was wrong, but I could hear his breathing. Deep, raspy, like someone trying not to cough. He passed right by the closet, didn't say a word. Then he stopped right outside the sanctuary, and I heard the creak of the big wooden doors opening. I slipped out quietly, praying the hinges wouldn't squeal, and tiptoed toward the front office. There was a landline there, old but functional. I picked it up and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered what was happening. She told me to stay on the line, stay hidden, and that officers were en route. Then I heard something that still messes with me. From the sanctuary, echoing faintly. Laughter. But it wasn't happy or warm. It was wet and gurgling, like someone choking on phlegm while trying to mimic laughter. Then I heard the piano. The church organ was ancient and barely functional. Nobody used it anymore. But someone was pressing. The keys not playing music, just dot, 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 pressing single notes. One at a time. Slow, out of tune. Random. Then a pause. Then footsteps again. I ducked under the office desk, phone still in hand. A few minutes later, I saw the red and blue lights flashing through the stained glass windows. The footsteps stopped. The front door creaked open, and whoever it was left by the time the sheriff's deputies searched the building. He was gone, vanished into the woods behind the church. No tire tracks, no footprints, nothing. they asked. If I had any enemies? If maybe it was a prank? I told them I didn't know the man. I didn't know how he got in. And I sure as hell didn't know what he was doing in that sanctuary. They promised to patrol the area more frequently. But they didn't take a report. They said since nothing was stolen and there was no forced entry, there wasn't anything they could really do. I quit that job the next day. A few weeks later, I got a text from the pastor. He said they'd found muddy boot prints up on the organ bench again. This time with dirt smeared across the keys. He asked me if I still had the church keys. I told him I mailed them back. But what I didn't tell him was that night the one where I saw the man. I went to double-check the locks after the cops left. The key was still in the back door, and it was turned from the inside. Story 3. This happened in the summer of 2017. When I was driving cross-country to visit family in Oregon. I was 25, newly laid off, and figured a long, solo road trip might help clear my head. No schedules, no rules, just me, my car, and a stack of burned CDs. I planned to camp most nights to save money, using roadside rest stops or national forests to pitch a quick tent and crash. The stretch that changed everything was somewhere in northern Nevada, long, empty desert roads, the kind where you can drive for an hour without seeing another vehicle. Just dirt, sky, and heat shimmer. It was day 4 of the trip, and I'd been behind the wheel for almost 10 hours. The sun was starting to drop, and that golden desert light had faded into a deep reddish blue. I wasn't near a town or even a marked campsite. Just a thin blacktop highway stretching endlessly into the dust. I remember checking my map app. There was a tiny rest area icon about 30 minutes ahead, just a gravel turnout with a couple picnic tables. A PPARENTLY. I figured it was better than pulling over on the shoulders, so I kept driving. By the time I got there, the sky had gone fully dark. The rest area was bleak. No lights, no vending machines, no bathrooms. Just 2 wooden tables, a rusted trash barrel, and a gravel loop. You could pull through. Desert scrub all around. There was no cell signal, but I was exhausted. So I killed the engine, grabbed my gear, and set up my little pop-up tent about 20 feet from the car. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Not peaceful, more like unnerving, even. The wind was still. I was inside the tent by 9:30 reading with a flashlight. I didn't even bring food out, just water. No fire. No music. I didn't want to draw attention in case someone else pulled in. Eventually, I dozed off. I don't know what time it was when I first woke up. It was still pitch black outside. There was a sound, a steady, low crunching. Like footsteps on gravel. I held my breath, thinking maybe a deer or something had wandered near the tent, but the steps were too regular, and they stopped. Right outside. Then I heard a zipper, not mine, being pulled down slowly. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding. My tent was zipped shut. So what the hell was being unzipped? I fumbled for my flashlight and clicked it on. The glow barely lit the inside of my tent, but outside, I heard the footsteps start again. This time, faster, circling, not walking away, circling. I killed the light, crawled toward the front of the tent and pressed my ear against the fabric. Silence. Then, very clearly, I heard breathing, right outside. Close, low, ragged. I didn't move. Then a voicemail.com to calm, he said. Thought you were asleep, I nearly screamed. I didn't. I just stayed frozen, every muscle locked. Then I heard another voice. A second man, this one closer to my car. He said, leave it. Nothing in there. Leave it. Not him, not that guy. Just ... it. I heard them walk away, but I didn't move. Not for what felt like forever. Eventually, I dared to unzip the tent just an inch and peek out. There was no one there, but about 20 feet from my tent, next to the picnic table, was a sleeping bag, fully unzipped, laid out flat. Like someone had just gotten up. But here's the thing. It wasn't mine. I never saw it when I arrived, and there were no cars in the lot. But mine, it was filthy, dark-stained, torn in places, and bulging at the center like it had something stuffed inside. I didn't look. Couldn't. I grabbed my keys, bolted to the car barefoot, and peeled out onto the highway without even folding up the tent. I drove for almost 2 hours before I saw another car on the road. I didn't stop until sunrise. When I finally got a signal, I called the local sheriff's office and gave them the exact location. The deputy sounded tired, almost annoyed, but he promised to send someone to check it out. Later that night, I got a call back. He told me the site was empty when they arrived. No people, no sleeping bag, no tent, nothing. But they did find shoe prints. 2 sets, one leading from the gravel to the edge of the scrub, and one set circling a small tent-sized. It's a patch of flattened ground. I asked if there had been any reports of missing, hikers or transients. He said no. Then he asked me something that's stuck with me ever since. "You sure you camped alone?"